Hello and welcome to this new session. In this new session, we're going to cover the async and the await components. Well, both together because these components work together, and well, that's why we'll cover them in only one session. Well, let's see first the async component. This component allows us to run a workflow asynchronously. Until now, all the workflows that we saw, they are synchronous workflows. For example, this one, because all the components in here are executed one at a time, one after the other, step by step. But this async component allows us to run workflows asynchronously. And how this works? Well, first, let's see some details about this component. First, we don't have extra settings. We don't have the gear button in this section, as we can have, for example, in the LLM prompt component. We don't have the gear button, so no extra settings. Another thing is that we don't have default inputs, but we have one default output that is called job ID. And the creation of inputs behaves in a different way than other components. Let's try it. If we create a new input, we can see that we have the created input, but in the outputs we have a new output with the same name but with the async label. So every time that we create a new input, a new output is created with the same name and with the async label. So how this works? Well, the async component turns all the input information into async outputs. So all the information that can be provided to these inputs can come from synchronous workflows. And once the async component is executed, the same information is going to be available in the outputs, but these outputs are going to be part of the asynchronous workflow. And well, so with that said, maybe you wonder why the job ID, this default output, doesn't have the async label. This is because the job ID is the only output that can work with synchronous workflows. All the new outputs are part of the asynchronous workflow, so they cannot be used in a synchronous workflow. Okay, with that said, let's see also the await. This component is the one in charge of retrieve the results of the asynchronous workflows. Because every time that the async component is executed, a job ID is generated. And this job is generated because we need a way to retrieve the results from every asynchronous workflow. So that's exactly what the await component receives in this job default input. It can receive an array of job IDs. And after the await component is executed, we're going to retrieve the result of those asynchronous workflows in the default output called results. And we have these settings in the await component: the minimum jobs count and the maximum wait time in seconds. These settings help us to define how many time or for how many jobs we're going to wait to be completed when we execute the await component. For example, let's imagine that we have 10 asynchronous workflows that are being executed, but we just want to wait until 5 of them are completed, and then that's it. So we can set the minimum jobs count to 5. Then we have to set the another settings, the maximum wait time in seconds. How many time we're going to wait for 5 jobs to be completed. So we can say, for example, 10 seconds. So this means that we're going to wait for 5 jobs to be completed in a period of time of 10 seconds. This 10 seconds is the whole time. But for example, if 5 jobs are completed in 5 seconds, where after 5 seconds the await component is going to be executed and it is going to retrieve the results. So this is like the maximum time. So yeah, this helps us a lot to, for example, there's some situation where I don't know, the execution of our agent, well, don't have to surpass some amount of time. So this await component can help us to define a time less than that timeout, so we don't trigger errors, or I don't know, some other situation can happen if we run our agents maybe in other platforms where they have some defined timeout that, well, we cannot control, so our endpoints cannot take too long being executed. So, well, we just see the basics of these components. Now we can see an example of the execution. In here we have a very simple workflow. Let's see what we have. We have an LLM prompt component. This is just using the echo option, so it's just going to print what we have in the prompt. We have an array with 3 prompts. One, generate 30 random characters, then generate 10 poems, then give 10 random countries. This array is going to be provided for each component, and each prompt is going to be executed in this in the loop branch. So each element of the array is going to be delivered to this async component. So as you can see, all the elements that we bind to these async outputs, they have a label here in the corner of the component that says async. That means that this component is part of the async workflow. The same is going to happen if I connect any kind of component in this branch. As you can see, now we have the same label, the same async label. So what happened here? Well, in the loop branch, we're going to receive each prompt of this array. This array, well, this prompt is going to be delivered in this async output, and is going to be delivered to this LLM prompt that the only thing that is going to do is execute that prompt, as you can see. So the prompt is executed, and after all the elements of the array is executed, we're going to have it in the result output. And these results are going to be delivered to the await. Why in the await? Well, one thing that you have to know is that since these 2 components are part of an asynchronous workflow, well, we are not going to have the results. The only thing that we are going to have is the job IDs. As I said, every time that the async component is executed, we generate a job ID, because the asynchronous branch is executed independently. They are executed, well, in a different way from the synchronous workflow. So those jobs IDs are going to come to the await component. We have here that we are just going to wait for 1 job to be completed, and the time that we're going to wait is 10 seconds. and we're just showing that results with an API output. So let's run this. If I run this, I have the 3 prompts. And let's run it. Each prompt. Well, one thing that you can notice here is that the execution was really fast. Because normally, well, the LLM prompt takes some time to be executed because it's a model. But in using the async component, well, we are only generating a job ID. This LLM prompt component is executed independently, so we don't have to wait for those workflows to be completed. And we can check the result of the for each component, and we have only IDs. These are the 3 job IDs generated for each iteration of the for each component. These are delivered to the await component, and when the await component is executed, we retrieve the results of these jobs. As we can see here, we have the job ID, and we have the information, well, the results. First, we have that, well, the prompt about random characters. Well, we have the result, we have a status of done. And we have these other 2 jobs that only has the status of pending. So that means that, well, based on the settings of the await component, we just wait for 1 job to be completed. So once we had 1 job completed, well, the await component retrieves automatically the results of the 3 job IDs. That's why the other 2 jobs are pending, because they didn't have enough time to be completed. We just wait 1 second. Well, we just wait for 1 job to be completed. So another thing that we can notice is, well, as I said in the session about the for each component, the output format, we have the option array of results, and I said that this specific option is here because we use it for the async and the await components. That's why we are using this option to retrieve the job IDs, because we just want an array with nothing else than the job IDs. We don't need the extra information. I don't know, that information that we can see when we use the full and minimal options. We don't want that. We just want a simple array with the job IDs in this case. That's why when you use the async and the await components and the for each component, yeah, well, you have to set this output format to array of results. Okay, so as I said, these async outputs cannot be used in synchronous and, well, normal workflows. So what happens if I want to bind this to this API output component? We can see that we have a warning about this connection. And well, we can see connection from synchronous to asynchronous component is not allowed. And well, SmithOS automatically is going to delete that connection to avoid that kind of behavior. Another thing that we can check in here is, well, let's execute this step by step. If we execute the async component, we check that we only have the job ID. generated. As I said, we cannot inspect the async variables. And as you can see, we cannot see in the debug mode how this LLM prompt that is part of the async branch, we cannot see how it's executed, because that's, as I said, is an independent workflow that is being executed in a separate way. And as I said previously, the only output of the async component that can be used in a normal workflow is the job ID. For example, if I just drag and drop this LLM prompt and I connect the job ID to this component, we can see that we are not being labeled like this with the async label. We don't have that in this LLM prompt connected to the job ID. This is because the job ID is not an async output. So you can keep in mind that in order to use the job ID, you can use it in a normal workflow. But the async outputs, no, you cannot. Okay, now let's see a real example. This agent you also can find in the templates section is the SEO content writer. And in this agent, you can see that we are using the async and the await component. So let's see how this agent works. Well, we have two endpoints, one to create the outline and the other one to write the full article. Every time that we request for an article, well, first the endpoint to generate the outline is executed. And once we have the outline, this outline is passed to the other endpoint to write the full article. And as you can notice, all the information of the outline is delivered to the async component. So in the outputs, we have all that information, but for the asynchronous workflow. So the whole process of generating the article and publishing as a draft in a WordPress site is part of the asynchronous workflow. And well, why is that? Because the process of writing the full article, well, it can take a long time. So to make this agent flexible, well, we have the option with the await component to set how much time we're going to wait for this job to be completed. So in this case, for example, for some users, we can set I'm just want to wait 2 seconds. And then, well, the asynchronous workflow is going to be still being executed. So your article is going to be generated and is going to be published as draft in your WordPress site, but you just don't want to wait all that time. Or maybe in the other hand, you want to wait for the whole process to be completed. So in that case, well, you can maybe you want to wait I don't know, 1 minute for the whole process to be completed. So let's set 2 seconds, for example. Okay, and let's try this agent. Well, first we're going just to set the WordPress these WordPress values to some sample values. Well, these are invalid, so obviously this WordPress component is going to fail to publish because we are setting up invalid information. Okay, so let's open the chatbot and let's ask. Okay, the outline is being generated. And here we have it. Okay, now it's asking for our approval, and yeah. Now it's writing the article, and you can see that, well, it, it waits it waited for 2 seconds, well, around 2 seconds, and then we have a response. That's why, because we set up that in the await component. We set just 2 seconds in here, and that's why we have a response. If we check in here the response, we can see that we have in the result the job ID, and the status is still pending. So that means that, well, the job was not completed in that period of time of 2 seconds. But what if we set another amount of seconds, for example, 1 minute? Um, and we try it again. Okay, we have the outline. And we approve the outline, and now it's going to write the full article. And well, in this case, we are expecting an error because, as you can see here, in this component, we are setting invalid data. So it's not going to publish the draft. So if we check here, we have the job ID, and in this case, yes, we are getting the results from the asynchronous workflow, because we have here the output. This is referring to this output from the API output component. And inside of that, we have the error, because we have here the error variable in the API output. And we have the respective error. In this case, this says that, well, the domain that we provide is not is invalid because it was not found. We set this domain. Obviously, this is wrong, and that's why we get this. So as you can see, here is a real example about these two components. And another thing that I want to show you is how we can check the execution of the whole asynchronous workflow. For example, I want to see what kind of inputs and outputs I am generating when I execute these asynchronous components. Well, our recommendation is while you are developing your agent, just use synchronous workflows. But once your workflows are ready and they are working as expected, yes, you can add then the asynchronous and the await components. Because, as I said, once you implement the asynchronous component, well, you cannot use the debug tools to inspect the inputs and outputs from an asynchronous workflow. But what if, for example, in this case, the agent is already developed, but I want to know the inputs and outputs from the whole asynchronous workflow? that I execute in a separate execution. So you can use the logs. The logs can be found in the agent settings. For example, this is the agent that we are using. If we click in the gear button, you're going to be redirected to the agent settings. If you click on the view logs, you're going to be redirected to the logs, and in here you can inspect each execution. For example, these last three executions are part of the last article that we generate. For example, we have the create outline, then the write article was called this endpoint, and then we have this one, and this one with this kind of ID. This is the asynchronous execution. If we can check, we're gonna click on it. Here we have this. Well, we see that the logs starts with this that says agent. Well, this is the logs from the chatbot calling the asynchronous execution. In here we have the API endpoint. If we show all of this, we have domain, instruction, key phrase, meta description, meta keywords, section 1, section 2, 3, 4. All of that is this API endpoint. Then we have an API call, and we have here the async component. We have the API endpoint delivering information to the async component, then the async component delivering information to this LLM prompt, that in this case is going to be one of these. So here we have 5 LLM prompt components, so we expect 5 of these logs async delivering to an LLM prompt. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And well, this other one is this one. As you can see, we receive a username and a password, and that's exactly what we have here, username and password. Then another LLM prompt, and well, finally with the API output, that is the end of the asynchronous workflow. So as you can see, even if you cannot use the debug tools to see how the execution went when you are running an agent that uses the async component, well, you have the option to check the logs, and you're going to find the whole information in these logs, so you can check if something is going wrong. Maybe you can inspect where an error was triggered. So yeah, you have a really useful tool in the logs to check how your asynchronous workflows are being executed. And well, that's it for this session. We covered many things, and well, if you have any more questions about this component that well can be a bit difficult to understand, you can post those questions in the Discord server, and yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye on those questions to give the proper responses. See you in the next session.